PvZ speedruns, not a very hot topic within the community, and rightfully so, because these can be extremely long and sometimes even boring. But I was recently watching who I'm sure you all know of, and he was doing a PvZ2 all-world speedrun. And while watching, I thought to myself, what if I try this with max level plants? Would it be any faster? And if so, how much faster? That's what I'm here to try to figure out today. But before we begin, I have to lay down a couple of really important rules. No power-ups, Zen Garden, or buying plant food. I just want to see how well the plants can do by themselves. And secondly, I can only use plants when they are naturally unlocked, which also means no premium or gemium plants, unless the game forces us to use them. I had to mention this rule because I technically already have everything unlocked and didn't want there to be a misunderstanding regarding this. Okay. Let's begin. Day 1 starts off, and we're only allowed to use sunflower, pea shooter, walnut, potato mine, and cabbage pult. I know you can see the other 3 plants that I have, but I'm just forced to bring those in because I have them all unlocked. But as the rule stated, I'll only be using them when I'm naturally supposed to unlock them. This level, I may do with sunflower, pea shooter, and cabbage pults. And with the use of a couple plant food on the cabbage pult, we beat day 1. Day 2 already had a bunch of plants planted beforehand, and I just filled in 3 spaces with pea shooters just to make it a little bit faster, but it wasn't really even needed. And afterwards, I just used a couple of zappy powers to make the level go by faster, and with that, day 2 was beat. Day 3 again helps us off a little bit with 2 sunflowers and a cabbage pult, and then I placed 2 pea shooters to help me get rid of these early gravestones. After destroying the gravestones, I fill 1 column with pea shooters and the other with cabbage pults, and this was basically enough to beat day 3. After beating day 3, we also unlocked the bloomerang. Day 4 is a conveyor level, and a lot of people, the comments of the last video said that if you plant the plants right away, the conveyor actually goes faster, which I didn't believe at first, but a lot of people mentioned Easy Speezy's name and that he mentioned it, and if the goat's saying it, it must be true. So I went with it and tried to plant all my plants as fast as possible, and day 4 was beat by the 3 minutes and 30-second mark. As day 5's come around, I should probably explain the speedrun factor behind this and how to actually make the levels go faster. And it's pretty simple. All you have to do is just hit the zombies right away. I believe if they get under 50% health, it sends in the next wave of zombies. So the sooner you can hit the zombies, the faster you beat the level. That's basically it. After beating day 5, we unlock the iceberg lettuce. Day 6 is supposed to be sort of like a mini boss level for ancient Egypt, but as all my plants are max level and they're very overpowered, it's not very difficult. So the main goal is just beating it as fast as possible. Day 7 starts, and there's like a pretty good amount of gravestones up front, and even though I want the pea shooters just to be my main damage source, I actually have to make use of the cabbage pult just so I can hit the zombies behind the gravestones faster, because otherwise I'm just losing a couple seconds every level if I don't, and that can add up quickly. Also, you notice that I don't really make use of a lot of sunflowers, only like 1, 2, or like 3 every level, and that's because not many are needed since they're max level. The max level sunflower produces more sun, but then the max level pea shooters and cabbage pults cost less sun, so it's like a double sun boost in a way. And day 7 was pretty easily beat, and so far we're on about a minute per level pace. Day 8 starts off and gives us a little helping hand with the explorer zombies. They give us a walnut, iceberg lettuce, and then 2 potato mines behind to beat them. We actually don't really make use of these, and I end up just shoveling the walnut and the iceberg lettuce and then spamming the map with pea shooters and 1 sunflower. And that was enough to beat day 8. Day 9, I plant 1 sunflower, 1 cabbage pult to take care of the early gravestones, and then just fill the map with a lot of pea shooters. It's now day 10, and some of you might be curious why I haven't really even used the boomerang or the iceberg lettuce. The boomerang, I don't really know why. Maybe I was just more allured by the pea shooter's 25 sun cost, but I do make use of the boomerang a little later on. Iceberg lettuce, on the other hand, is one of my favorite plants, but sadly, I couldn't use it because if by accident it freezes the last zombie, it ends up being a big time waste because the zombie just stays frozen on the screen and stops the level from being beat until it's unfrozen and then falls to the ground. And I don't want that to happen on accident, so I just tried to avoid it. Day 11 had 2 flags, and I used 3 sunflowers, and then again, pea shooter spam, because it was just the most efficient thing I had. On day 12, my first sunflower insta-plant fooded because of its mastery, and then also my first cabbage pult insta-plant fooded because of its mastery, which was very helpful because it took off most of the graves from the screen. And then I could just rely on my pea shooters to beat the rest of day 12. Day 13 is a little restricting with the mold colonies in the back, but as we don't need too much space to actually make our defenses work, they're not too big of a problem. So day 13 was beat pretty fast fast as well. After day 13, we unlocked Bong Choi. Day 14 had a bunch of gravestones, but other than that, nothing too special. Day 15 gave us a special challenge of protecting these 3 sunflowers, and this made it so that we didn't have to place any sunflowers of our own, which was very helpful, and we quickly got down our defenses and beat day 15. Day 16 was a pretty easy and fast level. Day 17 is one of the levels that in the recent update got a little glitched because it's a level that we can't have more than a certain number of plants on the screen, which is 14 for this level, but as you can see, I'm placing plants down, but the number isn't going down, so it's just glitched out and you can plant as many as you wanted. But I still tried to abide by the rules of the level, so I only used 14 plants and we're able to pretty easily beat day 17. Day 18, I finally made use of the bloomerang and prepped some defenses. And you'll notice that I only planted 1 column of bloomerangs and then started the level off without using all of my sun. That's because this 1 column is enough to beat the entire level, and we want to start the level as soon as possible so we can end it as soon as possible. I hope that makes sense. But if it doesn't, just know that this way is faster. And with that, day 18 was beat. Day 19 had some mold colonies and again a 16 plant limit, which again was glitched. You also notice that I don't have any sunflowers, and that's because I did the quick pick option, and as we didn't have any flowers in the lineup for day 18, day 19 it carried over, and you'll be seeing me make this mistake way too many times throughout this challenge. But thankfully, since all the plants are very cheap, a normal falling sun is usually enough to help me beat the levels. Beating day 19, we unlock repeater. Day 20, I remembered to bring sunflower in, but as we had to protect 4 sunflower that the game gave us, I actually didn't have to make use of it, and I made use of mostly bloomerang to beat this level. Day 21 gives us the twin sunflower, kernel pult, and melon pult to try out, and the twin sunflower is a little too expensive for my liking, so I end up just using 1 sunflower instead of it, and then a column of pea shooters, cabbage pults, and melon pults were able to beat this full day. Day 22 had an 18 plant limit, and I got through it by only using 15 plants. Day 23, again, the 1 sunflower and the handy dandy pea shooter, cabbage pult columns, and even the gargantuars weren't a threat to these guys. Day 24, I prepped some defenses. And afterwards, we unlocked Twin Sunflower. Day 25 was a boss level, but in the face of max level plants, the boss levels become a joke. And instead of being the longest level of the entire world, the boss level actually became the shortest level, with us beating it in only 40 seconds. And that was all of Ancient Egypt, beaten in about 30 minutes. Next up, the Pirate Seas. Day 1, we plant a sunflower in the back, and then a whole column of pea shooters to begin with, slowly planting a second one right afterwards. Then I also place a Twin Sunflower, and then try to get a column of bloomerangs off, but I didn't have enough time. Beating day 1, we also unlocked Kernel Pult. We don't really make much use of the Kernel Pult because the pea shooter's shooting velocity is just much better for the speed run. And so again, that's what we do on day 2, just spamming pea shooters. Day 3, I switched it up a little bit. Instead of placing 2 columns of just pea shooters, I did 1 column of pea shooters and then a second column of bloomerangs. And to help with this, I planted some extra sunflowers. After day 3, we unlock Snapdragon. Now, Snapdragon is one of the important plants this run, but I didn't use it on day 4 in some of the upcoming levels because I felt like the pea shooter bloomerang was still better for now, but later on, the Snapdragon is definitely needed. The next couple of levels are beaten using the pea shooter bloomerang method. Day 8 was a conveyor level, and the conveyor levels can be a little annoying when they keep giving you defensive plants such as the walnut, because the defensive aspect isn't really needed in this challenge since the damage of the other plants is just so good. So these can hold you back a little bit, but it's not too bad. So we beat day 8 pretty fast with the help of the Snapdragon, Spikeweeds, and Kernel Pults. Days 9 through 11, again, we utilize the pea shooter and bloomerang method. Day 12 is a special level where we're given 5 coconut cannons and a target point score of 3,000. And to get these points, you're supposed to combo the seagulls that come in with the perfectly timed coconut cannon shots. And as the 3,000 is a really easy goal to attain, I got it pretty fast, but then we still had to play the rest of the level as the level doesn't end when you reach this target score. So I decided to test out how good I could get the score to, and I ended with 19,900. I don't really know what the high score is overall, but let me know what your highest score is in the comments. Day 13, the special challenge was producing 2,000 sun, so that's what I decided to focus on at first, placing 1 column of pea shooters to begin with just so they could hold the zombies off, and then spamming sunflowers until we got that 2,000. And as we're nearing that 2,000 sun goal, I started placing my bloomerangs as I was confident that we were going to reach the goal, and this would just make the level go by faster. Day 14, I quickly prepped a column of bloomerangs. and then later a column of repeaters and a cabbage pole to take care of the rest of day 14. After day 14, I unlocked the second of who I would call the big three plants, the three-peater. The first of the big three was Snapdragon. The three-peater is really good because it can target its adjacent lanes and its own lane, and this is very useful because it allows me to not focus too much on my placements, as I can just place them in these 2 rows, making them able to hit every lane. Day 15, we had to protect these flowers in the back from getting trampled on, and these 4 repeaters were able to do it all just by themselves. Day 16, again, we had to protect these spring beans, and I only made use of 4 repeaters that were able to take care of all the zombies. Day 17, I started off with the boomerang pea shooter strategy, but towards the end, placed 2 three-peaters as their plant food is really good at taking out the big waves of zombies really fast. Day 18, the game chose our plants for me, and they didn't have any sunflowers in that lineup, but thankfully this level dropped sun, I think at like twice or 3 times the speed, so it wasn't really an issue and we beat it pretty easily with the use of pea shooters and repeaters. Day 19 was another produce 1750 sun level, and I did so by spamming sunflowers, twin sunflowers, and repeaters. Also this 1 pea shooter. Day 20, again, produced 1000 sun, which is really easy, and then just beat the rest of the level with the repeaters and pea shooters. Day 21, one more time, produced 2500 sun. I don't know why there's 3 of these in a row, but hey, I don't mind. It's pretty easy. Day 22, I started off by prepping 2 three-peaters, and as the level progressed, planted as many repeaters as I could to beat day 22. Day 23, again, I made the mistake of not bringing in a sunflower because of the previous level, so I had to resort back to the 25 sun cost pea shooters to beat this level. Day 24, I made use of pea shooters and boomerangs, and then day 25 came in the boss. We were first given 2 coconut cannons, and the first one did about 1/5 of its health, and then this three-peater insta-plant fooded and took it down to 1/3, which was pretty crazy. And then a couple seconds later, another coconut cannon plant food, the repeater, and the snapdragons were able to beat the boss very fast. Just goes to show how OP these max level plants really are. The first 3 levels of the Wild West we beat using the three-peater and pea shooters. Day 4, although slows down the pacing of the speedrun by a tremendous amount, it's still a really fun level because it's kind of like a puzzle. I placed the first 2 pea shooters on the tracks with the most access to all the lanes, and then as the level gave us a couple repeaters and three-peaters and split peas, it was made pretty easy, and we beat it around the 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 30-second mark. Day 5, we're back to the normal three-peater and sunflower strategy. Day 6, I prepped a couple defenses. Day 7, again, I forgot sunflowers because of the previous level, so I started off with a full column of pea shooters and then added three-peaters to take care of the rest of the level. Day 8 was a mini boss conveyor level that mostly included pea pods, who we had to maneuver around on the rail tracks to take care of the zombies. It wasn't too difficult of a level, just a little bit of micromanaging, and as the gargantuar started coming in, I started using my plant foods to take care of them. And with that, day 8 was beat. Day 9, the game chooses our plants for us, and it gives us the split pea, the chili bean, walnut, electric reed, and wintermelon. And we basically only used the electric reed to beat most of this level. Wintermelon I placed down for no reason, but the electric reed's attack speed is just much better. And after beating day 9, we unlocked the electric reed. And electric reed is the last plant of the big 3. Day 10 is where I start the use of a completely new strategy, and that's using electric reed and snapdragon. And you might have noticed a similarity between all 3 plants that are in the big 3. They're all plants that you can place in the middle 2 rows, and they're able to hit the adjacent columns. And this is important because I can place 2 plants down and basically account for all the levels before the first zombie even comes in. And this extremely speeds up the process of defeating the levels. Day 11, I can only spend 500 sun, so I placed 1 sunflower, 2 snapdragons, and 4 lightning reeds. This was more than enough to beat day 11. Day 12 was another puzzle conveyor level that first started off with the boomerang, and then later on gave us 2 lightning reeds that are able to just solo the rest of day 12. Day 13, we went back to the big 3 with the electric reed, three-peater, and snapdragon combo. Same with day 14. Day 15, we couldn't lose more than 2 plants, and that wasn't really that big of a challenge. Day 16, we had to protect this walnut, and we did so by spamming lightning reed and 3 snapdragons. Day 17, we couldn't let the zombies trample these flowers, so I protected them with the column of lightning reeds right in front of them, and then a column of snapdragons up front to beat all the zombies. Day 18, I prepped a couple defenses. Day 19 had a sun limit and I beat it by using 2 lightning reed and a spam of snapdragons up front. Day 20 was another puzzle conveyor, and the last wave is pretty scary on this one because it has a chicken wrangler and the level doesn't give us any lawnmowers, so we actually have to maneuver the pea shooters properly just so they don't break through. Day 21, we could only spend 1750 sun, and we had to protect these flowers from being trampled on, and I did so with 3 lightning reed and a few snapdragons. Day 22 chooses the plants for you, and it gives you sunflower, repeater, bloomerang, iceberg lettuce, potato mine, and wintermelon. I would use repeater, but the cost on it for its effectiveness is a little too high, so I ended up going with the bloomerang and then 2 wintermelon to finish the defense off. Day 23, I can't lose 2 plants, and we have to protect these flowers from being trampled on. And I know this level had chicken wranglers, so I ended up just spamming a ton of lightning reed just to make sure that they didn't get through. Day 24, we have to protect these walnuts, and the first thing I do is move them all into the same lane so they're just easier to manage. And then I place lightning reeds and snapdragons to take care of the level without losing a single walnut. And day 25 was the boss of the Wild West. If you remember last video with only lightning reed, this level took me a few tries and a lot of headaches to beat, but with the help of the other plants that are in the conveyor, this actually became a lot easier. And with that, we beat Wild West in about an hour and 42 minutes. Next up, the Frostbite Caves. Day 1 of Frostbite Caves, I learned something new. I thought that fire plants only were able to defrost the frozen plants in like a 3x3 radius around them, but apparently if they're leveled up enough, this radio increases by a lot because this one snapdragon was able to defrost this walnut way up top. On day 2, this snapdragon was able to defrost this one repeater so far away, which is pretty impressive. And besides having the ability to hit 3 lanes, these 3 plants also had different reasons that they were in the big 3 team. And the first reason was the snapdragon in Frostbite Caves, which allowed it to defrost the plants, which the other 2 can't do. But they do have abilities and specific things of their own that made them special that come in later on. Day 3 was kind of an annoying conveyor level that only gave us pea shooters, repeaters, spikeweeds, and hurricanes. And it was kind of a slow level, but we're still able to beat it. Day 4, we went back to normal, and I made use of 5 snapdragons and 5 lightning reeds. Day 5 was another conveyor level that made us use goat choy, cabbage pulp, and trash pulp. Day 6, the game chose our plants for us, so I couldn't bring in the normal strategy, so I was reliant on the bloomerangs, pea shooters, and sadly the trash pulps again to defrost my plants. Day 7, we could finally go back to the normal strategy, and we made use of the snapdragons and lightning reeds to take out the level. Day 8, again, was a conveyor level that made us use poopy pulp, but thankfully they also gave us bonk choy to help us out. Day 9, we went back to a column of snapdragons and lightning reeds, and the singular sunflower, of course. Day 10 was another conveyor level. Thankfully this time it had chard guards, 3 repeaters, and normal pea shooters, as well as hot potatoes to defrost them. Day 11, we used the big 3. Day 12, I prepped defenses. Day 13, we had to protect these flowers from being trampled on. It also had 4 flags that we had to beat alongside some sneaky snowstorm zombies, but thankfully we're able to beat them before they got too far. Day 14, the game chooses their plants for us, and garbage pull is actually pretty useful this level because it allows us to unfreeze all these sunflowers. And afterwards, I spam bloomerangs to beat the level. Day 15, we have to protect these 2 trash pults, and we do so with lightning reeds and snapdragons. Day 16, the game just keeps forcing me to use this guy, and sadly I have to because there's no other plants that can unfreeze the plants. Either way, day 16 will still beat. Day 17 had some frozen fume shrooms and chard guards who we broke the ice of using lightning reeds, and then afterwards spam snapdragons. Day 18 was a conveyor level that gave us a lot of bloomerangs and a couple citron, so it was pretty easy. Day 19 had some frozen plants in the back who I unfroze with snapdragon and then beat the rest of the zombies with snapdragons and lightning reeds. Day 20 was about the same with some lightning reed and snapdragon spam. Day 21, it was a conveyor level, and the game gave us fire pea shooters, who were pretty cool, but they're being very stingy with them and only gave us 5 this level, but we made it work and beat day 21. Day 22, we unfroze some guacadiles and then used snapdragons and electric reeds. Day 23, we have to protect these chard guards, and normally it's a little scary because of these snowstorms. As the chard guards themselves are max level, it's not really too big of a threat. Day 24, we had to produce 2500 sun, and so at first we only planted planted a couple lightning reed to hold off the zombies until I had a good amount of sunflowers down that I was confident that we could beat and complete the challenge of this level. And then after meeting 2500, I planted some more defenses down to speed up the process. Day 25 was a level with rutabaga and pepper poults, and rutabaga is pretty good, so it's a pretty easy level. Day 26 had 4 flags, and we beat it using snapdragons and electric reeds with some help from these pre-placed sun shrooms in the back. Day 27, we have to protect these rutabagas in the back, and this level actually sends gargantuars. As there's no snowstorms in this, it's actually a pretty easy level. Day 28, I prepped some defenses. Day 29 chose our plants for us, but thankfully it gave us fire pea shooter and rutabagas, so it was made pretty easy. And day 30 was the boss level, and this boss is usually one of the more difficult ones in my opinion, but with the help of the max level plants, we beat it in literally like 15 seconds, which might be a new world record. And next up was Lost City. Day 1 of Lost City, we used the normal strat. Day 2 shows off the red stringer, who's a pretty good plant, but not really viable for the speedrun. Day 3's a conveyor level where we are forced to use the red stinger and also lava guavas. And being that these plants are pretty good, we actually beat day 3 pretty fast. Day 4, again, we use lightning reeds and snapdragons. And you might notice me skip over a couple levels here and there from now on. That's because those were just levels that were kind of repetitive and had nothing special going on in them. But if you are curious about the skipped levels, I will be posting the full speedrun on my second channel, and you can go check it out there. Day 5 was a conveyor level that made us use red stingers and ekis. Both plants I don't mind at all, so it was beat pretty easily. Day 8 shows our plants for us, again, giving us red stinger, a key, but this time also puff shrooms and iceberg lettuces. We also had to protect these flowers in the middle from being trampled on. Maybe you noticed that we actually didn't get any sunflowers, so we had to use these gold tiles in the back pretty effectively. But as soon as we got enough sun, I planted a column of akis and red stingers, and they were pretty easily able to beat day 8. Day 9 was a conveyor level, but it included snapdragons, so it's made pretty easy. Day 12, however, we had to produce 5,000 sun, which is a lot. So at first, I spammed sunflowers and then placed 2 lightning reed just to hold off the zombies long enough that I could spam even more sunflowers and get to that 5,000 goal. And after I reached 5,000, I started planting more defenses to speed up the process of the level. Day 13 was another conveyor level, giving us the variety of the red stinger, a key, repeater, melon pult, and spike rock. All pretty solid plants. Day 14 chose the plants for us, and it gave us sunflower, lava guava, and a key. And a key can take care of most of the zombies on this level, except the umbrella zombie, who we have to save the lava guavas for. In doing so, we beat day 14. Day 15, we had to protect these Aki, and being so that they're good plants, it wasn't too difficult. Day 16 again was a conveyor level with a key and red stingers, but this time also some durians and cherry bombs. Day 18 was another conveyor with a key and red stingers again, and some stallia. Days 19 and 20 were beat using lightning reeds and snapdragons. Day 21 seemed like a tough level at first, as it only gave us sunbeam, toadstool, and stallia to work with, which seemed impossible. But as we slowly built up our sun production, we got a solid amount of toadstools down, and were able to beat day 21 without problems. Day 22 was a pretty interesting one because it gives us some pretty good plants like the red stinger and puff shroom, but then it throws a shovel zombie at us, who these 2 plants can't hit. So we actually had to make use of the boulder and flame tiles to beat these guys. And in doing so, we'd actually lose our red stingers and puff shrooms, but slowly but surely we're able to beat day 22. Day 23 had a lot of swinging Indiana Jones, but we're able to take care of them. Day 24, we had to protect these flowers from being trampled on, and we did so with the reliable snapdragon lightning reed strategy. Day 28 was one of these levels again, but this time the key and red stinger combo was able to hit all the zombies that were thrown at us, so we actually didn't have to use the boulders or the flames. Day 30, we're heavily limited by these mold colonies, and this Indiana Jones actually kind of catches me off guard and makes it past where I'm able to plant any plants, but thankfully the lightning reed's plant food was able to get it before it got too far. Day 31 chose the plants for us, and it gave us sunshroom, stallia, a key, and durian, magnifying grass, and toadstool. I really only made use of the sunshroom, a key, and magnifying grass, and were able to beat the level with these 3. And now we're on to the boss of Lost City. We first started off by placing the red stinger, which insta plant fooded, and then an durian right in front of it, which Didn't really do much, but still planted it. And then we got 2 Aki, who were constantly doing damage to the boss, and then another Red Stinger, and then the goat of this boss fight, the Bong Choi, whose plant food decimated the boss down to 1/3 of its health. And finally, its punches and this Red Stinger's plant food were able to take it down all the way, or so I thought it was all the way. And then like the boss kind of glitched a little bit, and then about after 10 seconds later, it was defeated. And that was all of Lost City beat in about 3 hours and 9 minutes. Next up, the far future. Days 1 through 5 were all beat using the Lightning Reed and Snapdragon combo. And then day 6 made us choose plants of its own, and we quickly got down a column of laser beans and pea shooters with a singular sunflower, and this was enough to defeat it. Day 7, for some reason, I chose not to use the Snapdragons and instead use the Lightning Reeds and only the 3-peaters. The 3-peater definitely has one of the better plant foods to take out all the zombies fast, because it kind of shoots off screen, which takes the zombies out before they even come in. Day 8 was a conveyor level that gave us laser beans, citrons, snapdragons, and walnuts with some power tiles as well. And I tried to symmetrically place everything, but it got pretty ugly pretty fast and I just gave up. Day 9, I could only plant 15 plants and I beat it with 10. Day 13, we could only spend 1500 sun and we beat it by spending 450. Day 15, we have to protect these very upfront placed citrons, but with double placed snapdragons and double lightning reeds, it was pretty easy. Day 16 was a conveyor level with bong choys, infinites, and citrons with some help from spikeweeds as well. Day 17 is a pretty fun one. It gives us sunflower, twin sunflower, and our only attacker is magnifying grass. So the whole idea is just farming up sun and then just spamming the magnifying grass's attack. Day 18 is a pretty insane one because we have to produce 6,000 sun. And to do this, we first place 2 lightning reeds in the back and spam sunflowers. Then when we're close to that 6,000 goal, we place some snapdragons to speed up the process of the level. Day 19 had some gargs, but it was pretty easy. Day 20, we have to protect these star fruit, and they're pretty good on themselves, but we planted some 3-peaters and then some lightning reeds in the back for the bot swarms. Day 21, again, is crazy because we have to produce 5,000 sun with only a 16 plant limit. And this seems a little difficult at first, but then I realized that I can just place my twin sunflowers in the 4 power tiles that are red and then use my plant food on them, and this gets us to the goal pretty fast. And we beat the level using only 14 plants. Day 22, I prepped some defenses. Day 23, I could only spend 2,250 sun and have 15 plants in total, and this was pretty easily beat. And next up was the boss level. It starts off by us placing a citron and then a power tile underneath it, and our first big chunk of damage comes from the citron, and then as we get a plant in basically every row, the boss is just bombarded and beaten. That was all the far future in about 3 hours and 45 minutes. Next up, the Dark Ages. Days 1 through 3 were beat using the triple threat combo. Day 4 was a conveyor level that brought back the cabbage pult and then also gave us hypno shrooms to use. Nights 5 through 7 were beat using the main strategy. Night 8 chose our plants for us, giving us sun shroom, sunbean, fume shroom, walnut, hypno shroom, and gravedigger. And with a couple sun shrooms and fume shroom spam, we're able to beat Night 8. Night 10 was a conveyor level that focused mainly on fume shrooms and puff shrooms with some potato mines, and since these are pretty solid plants, this was a pretty easy level. Night 12 is usually a little scary because we have to defend these puff shrooms in the back, and normally there's a lot of jesters and wizards sent, but as we don't even let them get past that first tile, it ends up being pretty easy. Night 13 was a conveyor level focused mainly on giving us peanuts and fume shrooms, and normally people aren't too big of a fan of peanut, but this one at the bottom actually was pretty tanky and went up against this jester, defending against it for a very long time. So they earned my respect for this level. Day 14 is probably the craziest level of this entire challenge, because it wants us to collect 5,000 sun, but the only sun production it gives us is the sunbeam and the gravestones that the level spawns for us. And since all my attackers are max level, they're not very good at stalling until we can get enough sun. So on my first attempt, I missed the sun goal by literally 250 sun, making this the first level that we actually lose to. But this isn't too big of a setback because on the second attempt, I made sure not to plant too many attackers until we reached the goal, which we thankfully did, and the level was complete. Night 17 isn't anything special, but I just like the satisfyingness that the lightning read gives us in the beginning, so I wanted to show it to you guys. Night 19 can look scary at first, as we have to defend these upfront magnet shrooms, but as we just spam all our heavy hitters to defend them, it was a pretty easy level. And Night 20 is the boss. You first get a kernel pole and a fume shroom, nothing too good, but later on I realized that the fume shroom was actually pretty good because it can do the pierce damage and just go through the gravestones straight to the boss, which was actually what most of our damage to the boss was coming from. So I focused on just plant feeding the fume shrooms. And with that, Night 20 was beat. Next up, the Neon Mixtape Tour. Day 1 starts off simple with the column of Sun Shroom, 2 Lightning Reed, and 5 Snapdragons to end it off. Day 2, I decided to use the 3 Peters instead of the Lightning Reeds, and it worked fine as well. Day 3 is a conveyor level that gives us the cactus to use. And cactus is one of my favorite plants, and I don't think it's because of the game design of it in PvZ2, but it's actually because of Garden Warfare 2, because it's my favorite plant to use in that game. More specifically, the red cactus. Let me know down in the comments if you're a red cactus main as well. Day 5, we have to protect these guys, and with a couple plant-fooded repeaters, it was pretty easily done. Day 6 was another conveyor level with fume shrooms, fat beets, and celery stalkers. Now, I didn't know that the celery stalkers plant food created multiples of it. That's pretty cool. Day 9, we have to produce 2,000 sun, and we're given no sun producers in our lineup because the game decides the plants for us. But thankfully, they do give us 10 sunflowers to try to get to that 2,000 sun. And at first, I just let these Mohawk guys kick them towards the back so they'd be better protected for later on. And after I felt confident that I was going to get that 2,000 sun, I started placing my defenses, and it made the level pretty easy. Day 10 was a level with mainly celery stalkers and a couple fat beets, and it was also pretty easy. Day 11, the game decides our plants for us, but thankfully it included the sunflower and 3-peter, and that was enough to beat the entirety of day 11. Day 14, again, the game decides our plants for us, but thankfully it had sun shrooms and cactuses, and that's all we really needed. Day 15, we had to protect these fat beets, and we did so without letting the zombies get past even the first tile. Day 16 was a conveyor with some gargantuars, but the fat beets plant foods were able to take them down pretty easily. Day 19 was a conveyor that gave us a lot of celery stalkers, fat beets, and 3 electric blueberries. And this was enough to beat day 19. Day 20, we had to protect the flowers from being trampled on, and we did so pretty easily using the pretty overpowered lightning reeds and snapdragons. Day 22 was a conveyor with spore shrooms and the casual cherry bomb, and the spore shrooms are pretty overpowered as they just duplicate right after they beat a zombie, and with this, the level was made pretty easy. Day 24, I prepped some defenses. Day 26, we had to protect these 4 spore shrooms, but as they're pretty good themselves, and we had the 3 peters and lightning reeds to help, it was done with ease. Day 27 was another conveyor that included fume shrooms, spore shrooms, garlics, and intensive carrots, as all these are pretty decent plants. Day 27 was not a problem. Day 31 chooses our plants for us, and it gives us sun shroom, electric blueberry, spore shroom, walnut, and intensive carrot, and we make use of basically the spore shroom and a couple electric blueberries to beat the entirety of this level. And next up was the boss. It started off with the fat beet that I placed way up front just so we can do some damage, but the Mohawk kicked him back a little bit. And then we got a cactus who was basically our main damage dealer against the boss because it just pierces through everything. The speakers are supposed to be there to block our shots, but the pierce is pretty overpowered. And so whenever I got a plant food, I made sure to use it on the cactus. And with that simple strategy, we beat the boss of Neon Mixtape Tour in about 5 hours and 3 minutes. Next up, the Jurassic Marsh. The first couple of levels of the Jurassic Marsh don't have any special challenges, so they're beat using the normal strategy. Day 3 was a conveyor level with grape shots and melon pults as our defenses. There was also a couple garlics, but they were made pretty useless once we got a full column of the melon pult down. Day 7 was a pretty devious combo, being a conveyor level and flowers from being trampled on level. The plants being given were Primal Pea Shooter, Primal Walnut, and also Magnet Shroom, which is a little weird because the bucket heads are made out of stone, but they still get magnetized. I don't really know how that works, but hey, it works. And since the primal walnuts were really tanky, the zombies couldn't really make it past that first tile, so we beat the level pretty easily. Day 8, we went back to that 3-peter lightning reed snapdragon strategy. Day 9, our plants were chosen for us, and we got sun shroom, primal pea shooter, primal walnut, Potato Mine, and Perfume Shroom. I was mostly just using the Sun Shrooms and the Primal Pea Shooters for my main damage, and then once in a while placing a Perfume Shroom if the dinosaurs were getting a little annoying. Day 12, we couldn't lose more than 6 plants, so I made sure to plant a lot of Snapdragons and plant food the 3-peater when the Gargantuars came in. Day 14, again, our plants were chosen for us, and it was Sun Shroom, Primal Pea Shooter, Iceberg Lettuce, Perfume Shroom, and Grape Shot, and Sun Shroom, Primal Pea Shooter, and Grape Shot basically carried. Day 15, we had to protect these Primal Walnuts, and we did so using the main strategy. Day 16 was a pretty scary level, as it was a conveyor, and it sent in a lot of zombies towards the end, but didn't really give me a lot of plants to defend with. As these are max level, we somehow managed and got through it. Day 19 was another conveyor, but it gives us one of the more broken plants in the game, which is Cold Snapdragon. It's basically a Snapdragon that freezes and slows down zombies. Day 20, we had to produce 2000 sun, but as we were given the Primal Sunflower and I brought in every other sun producer that I had in my arsenal, it was actually pretty easy to get to that 2000, and afterwards I could just focus on my defenses and beat day 20 as fast as possible. Day 22, I've spammed a whole bunch of 3-peaters. Day 23, the Primal Sunflower had become my main sun production because it produces so much sun when plant fooded. Day 27, this was also one of the strategies that I had started to include in my lineup, and that was placing the 3-peater very up front in that middle lane and then just constantly plant fooding it until the last wave was beat if I had enough plant food, because this would kill off the zombies before they even came in, very much progressing the speed of the run. Day 31 chose my plants for me, but it gave me Primal Sunflower and Cold Snapdragon, and Cold Snapdragon was just able to dominate. And next up was the boss level. We started off with a Primal Pea Shooter who doesn't do too much damage because he misses all of his shots, and then both of them get rocketed. But then we got a Bonk Choi who does crazy damage, constantly just punching the guy up. And with this measly setup, it was basically GG's. Bonk Choi is just OP. That was all the Jurassic Marsh. Next up, Big Wave Beach. Day 1 of Big Wave Beach, we only made use of Primal Sunflowers and 3-peaters, and we beat it pretty easily. Day 2, however, I decided to bring in Cabbage Pole. Now, Cabbage Pole wouldn't be one of my main options normally, but Big Wave Beach has the Snorkeler zombies who can't be hit with any of the other plants that I was previously using, and Cabbage Pole just happens to be one of the better and cheaper options to do so. Day 3 was a conveyor that gave us the use of Chomper, Pea Shooters, and Repeaters, you know, the OGs. Day 5 was another conveyor with Pea Shooters, Walnuts, and Tangle Kelps. And the max level Tangle Kelps are pretty cool because it can take down multiple zombies before vanishing. Day 8 was a Bowling Bulb level, and these are usually one of the more fun ones, but they actually end up being really bad for the speedrun because the Bowling Bulbs don't get the max level buffs that they normally would. I think it might be because they're not considered a full plant, but either way, after about 3.5 grueling minutes, we beat Day 8. Day 9's another conveyor with Pea Shooters and Bowling Bulbs, but the Bowling Bulbs here are much better than the previous level that we played because they actually get the max level buffs. Day 12, I prepped some defenses. Day 13, we had to produce 2000 sun, and we can only plant 35 plants. Now that might seem like a lot, but the lily pads underneath also count as a plant themselves. But we're able to beat this with the use of only 25 plants in total. Day 15, we protected these potato mines from lobbing plants that could take out the sneaky Snorkeler zombies. Day 18 is a conveyor with Guacodiles, who design-wise, I think is one of my favorites, but function-wise, I'm a little unsure. Like, I think it's good, but sometimes it's not good. I don't really know. Day 20, all the lanes get flooded with water at some point, so I was forced to use lily pads. Day 21 is a conveyor that gives me one of my favorite plants, the homing thistle. Day 24 was another bowling level, but this one took only about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so a whole minute faster than the previous one. Day 25, we could spend 3000 sun, and that was more than enough to beat the entirety of day 25. Day 26 was a conveyor with walnuts, lily pads, and banana launchers. This really put my clicking ability to the test. Day 29 was another level with all lanes susceptible to the water, so we had to use lily pads again. Day 30, we have to protect these Guacodiles in the back, and their biggest threat is really the fishermen that stand in the back, so I tried to just have something that was in front of the Guacodile at all times so they wouldn't get hooked. Day 31, again, I got to use homing thistle, and next up was the boss. We first placed down these bowling bulbs who plant fooded, but then got sucked in right away, and then a banana launcher who plant fooded and did about like 1/4 of its health, and the shark was managing to dodge a lot of the shots, but then it got to the point where we had so many plants placed down that it couldn't really dodge, and we ended up beating it. That was all of Big Wave Beach. Next up, the final world, Modern Day. Day 1 of Modern Day starts off like any other, with me spamming the overpowered strategy. Day 3 of Modern Day was a conveyor level that gave me literally the Snapdragons and the Lightning Reeds. I don't know what the game was thinking here, giving me the best strategy in my arsenal. Day 6, we had to produce 4,000 sun, and while playing, I hadn't realized this, so I had to quickly restart because we're already reaching the end of that level. On the second attempt, however, I was able to reach the goal. Day 8 was a fun but annoying level because we had to move the plants around to get 100 matches, and this is suboptimal for a speedrun. And similar to that Big Wave Beach bowling bulb level, this took me about 3 minutes and 30 seconds to beat. Day 9 forced me to use Moonflower and Nightshade, and Nightshade's a pretty good plant when paired with Moonflower, so I wasn't too worried about it. Day 13 came another matching level, and this time we had to match 150 times, and this took me nearly 4 minutes and 20 seconds to do. Day 14, again, we're forced to use the Moonflower Nightshade combo. Day 15, we protected these Primal Walnuts. Day 16 was a conveyor level with some pretty hefty big damage dealing plants, so we beat it pretty easily. Day 19 was another conveyor level with some pretty decent plants such as the Laser Bean and Primal Pea Shooter. And then day 22 came another matching level, but thankfully this time it was only 75 matches. This one only took me about a minute and 40 to beat. Day 25 has a pretty cool concept where it burns all these plants right off the bat, and then the conveyor gives us intensive carrots to revive them as our defenses. And I revived mainly the Fume Shrooms and Colonel Pults to help me out. Day 27 was another matching level with 100 matches, and this one took me a minute less than the first 100 matches one at 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Day 28, we had to produce 3,000 sun, and with the help of Primal Sunflowers, we did so pretty easily. Day 30 is normally a really scary level because we have to protect these flowers from being trampled on, but the level sends in a lot of really strong zombies. As our 3-peaters and Lightning Reeds are pretty strong, they weren't really a problem. And now we're on to the first boss of Modern Day. And yep, I said the first boss because Modern Day actually has 3 bosses to beat in total. The first one is the Wild West one, so we get laser beans and citrons as our main damage sources, and they're able to take it out really fast. The second boss is the Dark Ages dragon, and we're given bowling bulbs and banana launchers as our main damage sources with the help of crocodiles, but they're kind of meh. The bowling bulbs were there to slowly just chip away at his damage, as I completely forgot to use the banana launcher until the end, and with that, the dragon was slain. And the third and final boss is the Neon Mixtape Tour Zomboss. Our first main damage dealer was Primal Potato Mine, but then again, we got the Cactus, and as soon as I got a plant food, I used it on him. And as I used my last plant food on a Primal Pea Shooter and a Cactus, Zomboss was taken down, and that was time. Comparatively, Easy Speezy's time in his run with non-max level plants was about 14 hours and 8 minutes. Pretty impressive getting to 7 hours and about 44 minutes. Just goes to show how overpowered the max level plants are. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Okay, bye-bye.